The woman lying under the spreading oak tree looked like she had been there for days, her dress dusty and torn, her dark hair tangled with bits of dried grass, and her belly swollen with child. Lucas Paxton spotted her from his horse as dawn broke over the Arizona Territory in the summer of 1876, the sky bleeding pink and orange across the horizon near his ranch outside Rawhide. He dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the hard, packed earth with a thud, and approached cautiously, not wanting to startle her if she was sleeping. But as he drew closer, he could see her eyes were open, staring up at the branches above her with a vacant expression that spoke of exhaustion deeper than he had ever witnessed. "Madam," he called out gently, removing his hat out of respect. "Madam, are you hurt?" She turned her head slowly toward him, and he saw that her face was sunburned and her lips were cracked from dehydration. Her eyes were a startling green, even dulled by fatigue as they were, and they focused on him with difficulty. "Water," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lucas quickly grabbed his canteen from his saddle and knelt beside her, lifting her head carefully to help her drink. She gulped at first, and he had to pull it away gently. "Easy now, not too fast or you will make yourself sick." He let her have another small sip, and then another, until some color began to return to her pale cheeks. "Thank you," she managed, and he could hear a cultured accent in her voice, not the rough frontier speech he was accustomed to. She was educated, he realized, or had been raised somewhere back east perhaps. "What are you doing out here alone?" he asked, looking around for any sign of a wagon or horse, but there was nothing. "Where did you come from?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she turned her face away from him. "I walked," she said. "I walked from Tucson after my husband died of fever 3 weeks ago. I have nowhere else to go. I tried to reach the stage station, but I got lost, and then I could not walk anymore. I thought I would die here." Lucas felt his chest tighten with an emotion he could not quite name. He was a practical man, 32 years old, and had been running his ranch alone for the past 5 years since his parents passed. He kept to himself mostly, made a decent living with his cattle and horses, and had never felt particularly lonely. But looking at this woman, so vulnerable and clearly at the end of her rope, he felt something stir inside him that he had not felt in a very long time. "Well, you are not going to die," he said firmly. "Can you stand? My ranch is just over that ridge. I can get you there, get you fed and rested." She looked at him with such naked hope that it nearly broke his heart. "I have no money to pay you," she said. "I have nothing at all." "I did not ask for payment," Lucas replied. "Come on now, let me help you up." He lifted her carefully, supporting most of her weight as she struggled to her feet. She was tall for a woman, perhaps 5'7" or so, and despite her condition, he could tell she had once been quite strong. Her pregnancy made her movements awkward, and he could tell the baby was due soon, probably within a month or two by the size of her belly. "My name is Hannah," she said as he helped her toward his horse. "Hannah Everlie. I was married for only 6 months before my husband passed. We came west looking for opportunity, but we found only hardship. Lucas Paxton," he introduced himself. "I am sorry for your loss, Mrs. Everlie. That must have been terrible for you." He helped her mount his horse, then swung up behind her, keeping one arm securely around her waist to make sure she did not fall. She leaned back against him, and he could feel her trembling with exhaustion. The ride back to his ranch took only 15 minutes, but he could feel her growing heavier against him as she fought to stay conscious. His ranch house was modest but well built, with sturdy wooden walls and a good roof that kept out the rain and sun. He had built it himself with the help of some hired hands, and he took pride in the fact that everything was solid and functional. There was a main room that served as kitchen and living space, and his own bedroom off to one side. Behind the house was a barn, corrals for the horses, and grazing land that stretched for miles. He carried Hannah inside and laid her gently on his own bed, the only real bed in the house. She was barely conscious now, murmuring something he could not make out. Lucas grabbed a clean cloth and a basin of water and began gently washing the dirt from her face and hands. Her dress was in terrible condition, stained and ripped in several places, and he realized she would need proper clothing. For the next several hours he tended to her like a nurse, making sure she drank water regularly, feeding her small amounts of broth and letting her sleep. As evening approached, she finally woke properly, her eyes clearer and more alert. "I am in your house," she said, looking around with surprise. "I thought perhaps I had dreamed you." "No dream," Lucas assured her, bringing her a bowl of warm stew he had prepared. "You need to eat something more substantial now." "How are you feeling?" "Better," she admitted, struggling to sit up. He helped arrange pillows behind her back, and she accepted the bowl gratefully. "I cannot believe your kindness, Mr. Paxton. You do not even know me, yet you have taken me into your home. What kind of man would I be if I left a pregnant woman to die under a tree?" He replied, settling into a chair near the bed. "Besides, I have the room and it gets lonely out here sometimes. The company might be nice." Hannah ate slowly, savoring each bite as though it was the finest meal she had ever tasted. "This is delicious," she said. "You are a good cook." "I have had plenty of practice," Lucas said with a slight smile. "When you live alone, you either learn to cook or you starve." As the days passed, Hannah slowly regained her strength. Lucas found some of his mother's old dresses packed away in a trunk and gave them to her, along with a brush for her hair and other necessities. She insisted on helping around the house despite his protests, starting with small tasks like washing dishes and gradually taking on more as she felt able. 2 weeks after he found her, Lucas woke early one morning to the smell of fresh bread baking. He walked into the main room to find Hannah pulling golden loaves from the oven, her face flushed from the heat but smiling. "I hope you do not mind," she said. "I wanted to do something to thank you for all you have done." "Mind?" Lucas shook his head, genuinely pleased. "That smells better than anything I have made in years. You did not have to do this." "I wanted to," Hannah insisted. "I feel like such a burden, staying here and eating your food without contributing anything." "You are not a burden," Lucas said firmly, and he realized he meant it with his whole heart. Having Hannah in his house had changed something fundamental about his daily life. The ranch no longer felt empty and silent. There was laughter in the mornings, conversation over meals, and a warmth that had nothing to do with the Arizona heat. Over breakfast, Hannah told him more about her life. She had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a schoolteacher, and had received an education herself. She had met her late husband, Thomas, at a church social, and they had married quickly when he announced his intention to head west to make his fortune. "I loved him," she said quietly, "but I think we were both very naive about what we were getting ourselves into. He died before we could even establish a proper homestead. The fever took him so quickly." Lucas listened without interrupting, letting her tell her story in her own way. When she finished, she looked at him with those remarkable green eyes and asked, "What about you, Mr. Paxton? How did you come to have this ranch?" "My parents came here when I was a boy," he explained. "My father wanted land of his own, and this territory offered that opportunity. We built this place together, worked it together. They both died 5 years back, within 6 months of each other. My father had a heart condition, and my mother just seemed to give up after he passed. I have been running the place alone since then." "That must have been very hard," Hannah said softly. "It was," Lucas admitted. "But you do what needs to be done. The cattle need tending, the horses need breaking, and life goes on whether you are ready for it or not. They fell into an easy routine over the following weeks. Lucas would wake before dawn to tend to the animals and do the necessary ranch work, while Hannah managed the house and prepared meals. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the desert landscape and talking about everything from books to religion to their hopes for the future. Lucas found himself increasingly drawn to Hannah. It was not just her physical beauty, though he certainly noticed that as her health improved and the sunburn faded from her face. It was her intelligence, her humor, the way she listened when he spoke about his dreams of expanding the ranch, and the thoughtful questions she asked. She was genuinely interested in the work he did, and she understood the satisfaction he took in building something with his own hands. For her part, Hannah felt something she had not expected to feel again so soon after losing Thomas. Lucas was nothing like her late husband. Where Thomas had been talkative and ambitious, Lucas was quiet and steady. Where Thomas had been quick to make grand plans, Lucas was methodical and practical. But there was a strength in Lucas that she found deeply comforting, and a kindness that seemed to radiate from him in everything he did. One evening, about a month after Lucas had found her, Hannah went into labor. She had been sitting on the porch with Lucas when the first pain hit, a sharp contraction that made her gasp and clutch her belly. Lucas was on his feet immediately, his face pale with concern. "Is it time?" he asked, and she nodded, trying to breathe through the pain. "I think so," she managed. "The pains have been coming and going all day, but that one was much stronger." Lucas helped her inside and got her settled in bed, then rode hard into Rawhide to fetch Doc Williams, the only doctor within 50 miles. The elderly physician arrived within 2 hours, his medical bag in hand and his expression calm despite the urgency of the situation. "First baby?" Doc Williams asked Hannah, and she nodded. "Well, these things take time, young lady. You just try to stay calm and let nature do its work." Lucas paced outside the bedroom for hours, listening to Hannah's cries of pain and feeling utterly helpless. He had helped birth countless calves and foals, but this was entirely different. This was Hannah, and the thought of anything going wrong made his chest feel tight with fear he had never experienced before. Finally, just as the sun was beginning to rise, he heard a new sound, the thin, angry wail of a newborn baby. Doc Williams emerged from the bedroom a few minutes later, wiping his hands on a towel and smiling. "You have a healthy baby boy, Mr. Paxton," he said, and then caught himself. "I am sorry, I should not have assumed. Are you the father?" "No," Lucas said quickly, feeling his face flush. "No, Mrs. Everlie is a widow. I found her on my land and took her in." Doc Williams raised his eyebrows but said nothing more about it. "Well, regardless, mother and baby are both doing well. You can go in and see them if you like." Lucas entered the bedroom cautiously, not sure what to expect. Hannah was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of his mother's old quilts. She looked up at him and smiled, tears streaming down her face. "Lucas, come meet him," she said softly. He approached and looked down at the baby, whose small face was scrunched up and red. "He is beautiful," Lucas said, and he meant it. "What will you name him?" Hannah looked down at her son with such love that Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Thomas," she said quietly, "after his father. Thomas James Everlie." Over the following weeks, Lucas found himself more and more involved in little Thomas's care. Hannah was an excellent mother, attentive and loving, but she was also recovering from childbirth and often exhausted. Lucas would walk the baby around the house late at night when he was fussy, singing old songs his own mother had sung to him. He changed diapers, heated milk, and did whatever was needed to help. Hannah watched Lucas with her son and felt her heart swell with feelings she was not quite ready to name. He was so gentle with Thomas, so patient, and she could see genuine affection in his eyes when he looked at the baby. She had never expected to find this kind of goodness in anyone, let alone a man who owed her nothing and had every right to send her on her way. One evening, when Thomas was about 2 months old and sleeping peacefully in a cradle Lucas had built, Hannah and Lucas sat together on the porch as they often did. The air was cooler now that autumn was approaching, and the stars were brilliant in the clear desert sky. "Lucas," Hannah said hesitantly, "I have been meaning to talk to you about something." He turned to look at her, his expression attentive. "What is it?" "I cannot continue to impose on your hospitality forever," she said, the words painful to speak. "You have been more generous than I could ever have imagined, but I need to make plans for Thomas and myself. Perhaps I could find work in town, or maybe I could teach children if there is a need." Lucas felt panic rise in his chest at the thought of Hannah and Thomas leaving. Over the past months, they had become the center of his world in a way he had never anticipated. The house would feel dead and empty without them, without her. "Hannah," he said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "I do not want you to go." She looked at him in surprise. "You do not?" "No," he said firmly, turning to face her fully. "These past months, having you here, having Thomas here, it has changed everything for me. This ranch finally feels like a home instead of just a place where I work and sleep. I know you are still grieving your husband, and I know this might not be what you want to hear, but I need you to know how I feel." Hannah felt her heart begin to race. "How do you feel, Lucas?" He took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "I am falling in love with you, Hannah." "Maybe I already have fallen. I think about you constantly. I love the sound of your voice, the way you laugh at my terrible jokes, how good you are with Thomas. I love that you are educated and can discuss books I have only half understood. I love that you are not afraid of hard work, and that you treat me like an equal even though I am just a rancher. I want you to stay here, not as a guest or someone I am helping, but as my wife. If you will have me." Hannah felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "Lucas, she began, and then stopped, overwhelmed by emotion. "I thought I was alone in feeling this way. I have been falling in love with you too, but I was afraid to say anything. I did not want you to think I was trying to take advantage of your kindness, or that I was looking for a father for Thomas rather than truly caring for you." "Do you care for me?" Lucas asked, hardly daring to hope. "Yes," Hannah said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Lucas, I care for you so much. You are the finest man I have ever known. You are strong but gentle, practical but thoughtful, and you have shown me more kindness than I ever thought possible from another human being. I would be honored to be your wife." Lucas felt joy explode in his chest, so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. He stood and pulled Hannah to her feet, wrapping his arms around her carefully, mindful of her still healing body. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this decision," he promised, his lips close to her ear. Hannah pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, and then, for the first time, they kissed. It was gentle and sweet, full of promise and new beginnings, and when they finally separated, both of them were smiling through their tears. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony in Rawhide, with Doc Williams and his wife as witnesses. Hannah wore a simple blue dress that Lucas had bought for her in town, and Lucas wore his best suit, his dark hair neatly combed and his boots polished until they shone. Thomas, now 3 months old, was held by Mrs. Williams during the ceremony, gurgling happily and seeming to approve of the proceedings. After they were married, Lucas did something that moved Hannah to tears. He took her to a section of the ranch house where an unused storage area had been, and opened the door to reveal a beautiful new bedroom. The walls had been freshly painted. There was a large bed with a new quilt, a rocking chair by the window, and a crib for Thomas next to it. Wildflowers were arranged in a vase on the dresser. "When did you do all this?" Hannah asked in amazement, walking slowly around the room and taking in every detail. "Over the past few weeks, late at night when you and Thomas were sleeping," Lucas admitted, looking pleased with her reaction. "I wanted you to have your own space, something that was yours. I wanted you to feel like this was truly your home." Hannah turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Lucas Paxton, how did I get so lucky to find you? Or rather, how did you find me under that tree?" Lucas crossed the room and took her hands in his. "I think maybe we were meant to find each other," he said. "I do not believe in much, but I believe in that." He led her to the window and pointed to the room. "You are home now, Hannah. This is where you belong, where we belong. You and me and Thomas building a life together." Hannah kissed him then, deeply and with all the love she felt in her heart. When they finally separated, she whispered, "Yes, I am home. Finally, truly home." The first months of their marriage were a time of adjustment and joy. Hannah threw herself into making the ranch house a real home. Adding curtains she sewed herself, planting a vegetable garden, and even convincing Lucas to help her build a chicken coop so they could have fresh eggs. Lucas found that having a wife changed the rhythm of his days in the best possible ways. There was someone to share his breakfast with, someone to discuss ranch business with, someone to hold in the evenings when the work was done. Thomas thrived in the environment of love and security that his mother and new stepfather provided. By the time he was 6 months old, he was a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everyone and seemed particularly attached to Lucas. Lucas had never imagined how completely he could love a child who was not his by blood. But Thomas felt like his son in every way that mattered. One evening in early spring, about 4 months after their wedding, Hannah had news to share. They were sitting on the porch after supper, watching Thomas play with some wooden blocks Lucas had carved for him, when she reached over and took Lucas's hand. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement and nervousness. Lucas looked at her with concern. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," Hannah said, smiling. "Lucas, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." Lucas stared at her for a moment, processing this information, and then a huge grin spread across his face. "A baby! We are having a baby." "Yes," Hannah laughed, delighted by his reaction. "I am about 2 months along, I think. I wanted to be sure before I said anything." Lucas pulled her into his arms, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "This is the best news I could possibly imagine," he said. "Thomas is going to be a big brother." As Hannah's pregnancy progressed, Lucas was attentive and protective in a way that made her feel cherished beyond measure. He insisted she not do any heavy lifting, took over most of the cooking in the evenings, and worried constantly about her health. Hannah found his concern endearing, though she sometimes had to remind him that she had done this before and knew what to expect. Thomas was walking now, taking unsteady steps around the house and getting into everything with the fearless curiosity of a 1-year-old. Lucas loved watching him explore, always ready to catch him when he stumbled. He had started calling Lucas Papa, which made Lucas's heart swell with pride every time he heard it. In early November of 1877, Hannah went into labor for the 2nd time. This birth was easier than the first, and with Doc Williams once again in attendance, she delivered a healthy baby girl just after midnight. Lucas was allowed into the room almost immediately this time, and he looked down at his daughter with wonder and joy. "She has your eyes," Hannah said softly, watching Lucas hold the baby with practiced ease. Those same blue eyes. Lucas could not stop staring at the tiny person in his arms, his daughter, his blood. "What should we name her?" he asked. Hannah had thought about this for months. "I was thinking Rose, after your mother. Rose Caroline Paxton, if that would be all right with you." Lucas felt tears prick his eyes. He had not cried in years, but the emotion was overwhelming. "That would be perfect," he managed. "My mother would have loved that." Life with two small children was chaotic and exhausting, but also filled with more love and laughter than either Lucas or Hannah had ever known. Thomas was a protective big brother from the start, always wanting to help with Rose and bringing her his toys to play with. Lucas expanded the house, adding another bedroom and a larger kitchen, determined to make sure his growing family had all the space they needed. The ranch prospered under Lucas's careful management and Hannah's sharp business sense. She helped him negotiate better prices for his cattle and suggested diversifying into breeding horses, which proved to be extremely profitable. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the increased workload, young men from town who were hardworking and reliable. 3 years after Rose was born, Hannah gave birth to another child, a boy they named Samuel Lucas Paxton. And 2 years after that, another daughter arrived, whom they named Grace Elizabeth. Their house was full of noise and activity, with children running in and out, toys scattered everywhere, and constant demands for attention. Lucas and Hannah would sometimes collapse into bed at night, exhausted beyond words, and then look at each other and laugh at how far they had come from that morning when he found her under the tree. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked one night as they lay in bed, listening to the sounds of their children sleeping in the nearby rooms. "Taking me on, I mean, all of this chaos and work." Hannah turned to face him in the darkness, touching his cheek gently. "Never," she said firmly. "You saved my life, Lucas. You and this ranch and this family, you gave me everything I thought I had lost. I love you more than I can possibly express." "I love you too," Lucas replied, pulling her close. "You made my life mean something beyond just surviving day to day. You made me understand what it means to really live." As the years passed, the Paxton family became well known and respected throughout the territory. Lucas served on the town council in Rawhide, helping to make decisions about schools and roads and other community needs. Hannah started a small school on the ranch, teaching not just her own children but also the children of their ranch hands and some families from nearby homesteads. She was a gifted teacher, patient and creative, and the children adored her. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved reading and showed an aptitude for numbers that surprised everyone. Lucas made sure Thomas knew about his birth father, showing him the few belongings Hannah had managed to keep from Thomas Everly, and making sure he understood that he had been loved by 2 good men. Rose was bold and adventurous, always climbing trees and riding horses, with a laugh that could be heard across the ranch. Samuel was quieter, sensitive and artistic, always drawing pictures of the animals and landscapes around him. Grace was the baby, spoiled and sweet, with a talent for music that emerged when Lucas bought a piano for the house and discovered she could pick out melodies by ear. When Thomas was 10 years old, Hannah became pregnant again, much to everyone's surprise and delight. She was 33 now, older than she had been with the previous pregnancies, and Doc Williams cautioned that she needed to take things easy. Lucas worried constantly, but Hannah was strong and healthy, and in the spring of 1887 she delivered healthy twins, a boy and a girl they named David and Catherine. 6 children, Lucas marveled as he held one twin while Hannah nursed the other. "We have 6 children, Hannah." Our lives are completely insane." Hannah laughed, tired but happy. "Yes, they are, and I would not change a single thing." The older children were wonderful with the twins, taking turns helping to care for them and fighting over who got to hold them. The house was even more chaotic than before, but it was also filled with such love and warmth that visitors often commented on it. There was something special about the Paxton home, a sense of genuine happiness and belonging that was rare to find. Lucas continued to expand the ranch, eventually owning over 2,000 acres of prime grazing land. He was known for treating his workers fairly, paying good wages and providing decent housing. He became a successful horse breeder, with buyers coming from as far away as California to purchase his stock. But despite his success, he never lost his essential humility or his gratitude for all he had been given. Hannah watched her husband age gracefully over the years, his dark hair turning gray at the temples, his face developing lines from years of sun and wind and laughter. She thought he became more handsome as he got older, and she never tired of being in his presence. Their physical relationship remained strong and loving, and they still found time to steal moments alone together, despite the demands of their large family. When Thomas turned 18 in 1894, he announced his intention to go east to attend college, wanting to study law. Lucas was initially hesitant, not wanting to lose his oldest son, but Hannah encouraged it. "He needs to find his own way," she told Lucas. "We raised him to be independent and thoughtful. We have to trust that he will come back to us when the time is right." Lucas knew she was right, and so they sent Thomas off with their blessing and enough money to see him through his education. He wrote home regularly, telling them about his classes and the city and the opportunities he was discovering. He graduated 4 years later at the top of his class, and did return to Arizona, opening a law practice in Rawhide, and eventually serving in the territorial legislature. Rose surprised everyone by falling in love with one of the ranch hands, a young man named Jack Murphy, who had worked for Lucas for 3 years. Lucas was skeptical at first, wanting better for his daughter, but Hannah reminded him that Jack was hardworking, honest, and clearly devoted to Rose. They married when Rose was 19, and Lucas deeded them a section of his land to start their own ranch. They built a house just a few miles from the main ranch, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to be independent. Samuel showed no interest in ranching, much preferring his art. Lucas and Hannah supported his passion, and when he was 17, they arranged for him to study with an established artist in Santa Fe. His paintings began to sell, and he eventually became well known for his depictions of Western landscapes and Native American subjects. Grace married a piano teacher from Tucson when she was 21, a gentle man who appreciated her musical talent and encouraged her to perform. They moved to Phoenix, where Grace gave music lessons and occasionally performed in concerts. David and Catherine, the twins, were still young when their older siblings began leaving home, and they became extremely close as a result. As the turn of the century approached, Lucas and Hannah found themselves with an emptier house, but no less love between them. They were both in their 50s now, older but still healthy and active. They still ran the ranch together, though they relied more heavily on their hired help than they once had. One evening in the spring of 1900, they rode out together to the oak tree where Lucas had first found Hannah. It was something they did occasionally, a pilgrimage to the place where their story had truly begun. They dismounted and stood under the spreading branches, looking up at the stars that were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "I slept under these stars thinking I was going to die," Hannah said quietly, her hand in Lucas's. "I was so alone and so afraid, and I could not imagine any future at all." Lucas squeezed her hand. And now I have had a life beyond anything I could have dreamed, Hannah said, turning to face him. I have had love, real love, and children, and a home that feels like the safest place in the world. I have had you, Lucas, and that has made all the difference. Lucas pulled her close, kissing her forehead. Do you remember what I said to you that day? When I finished building your room, you said I was home now, Hannah replied, tears shining in her eyes. You are, Lucas said. You have been home from that very first day. You belong here with me, and you always will. They stood there together as the stars came out one by one, holding each other and remembering all they had been through. The struggles and the triumphs, the births and the partings, all the ordinary moments and extraordinary joys that had filled their years together. As they rode back to the ranch house, they could see lights in the windows and smoke rising from the chimney. David and Catherine were home, probably preparing supper and arguing about something inconsequential the way siblings do. Tomorrow, Thomas was bringing his wife and 3 children for a visit. Rose and Jack would likely stop by with their 2 boys. It was a full life, a good life, and Lucas and Hannah had built it together from nothing. That night, lying in bed with Hannah in his arms, Lucas thought about all the different ways a life could unfold. If he had ridden out an hour later that morning, he might have missed finding her entirely. If Hannah had died under that tree, he would never have known what he was missing. But fate or luck or providence had brought them together at exactly the right moment, and everything that followed had been a gift. I love you, he whispered to Hannah, who was already half asleep. I love you too, she murmured back, snuggling closer. Always have, always will. Lucas closed his eyes, listening to the familiar sounds of his house settling for the night, and felt complete contentment. He had everything a man could want. A woman he loved deeply, children who made him proud, work that satisfied him, and a place in the world that felt right. He had taken a pregnant woman sleeping under the stars, built her a room, told her she was home, and in the process, he had found his own home too. Everything else had flowed from that one moment of compassion, that one decision to help someone in need. The Paxton Ranch continued to thrive for many more years. Lucas and Hannah celebrated their silver anniversary in 1902, surrounded by all their children and a growing number of grandchildren. Thomas had become a prominent lawyer and politician. Rose and Jack's ranch was successful. Samuel's art was exhibited in galleries across the West. Grace was a respected music teacher, and David and Catherine, now in their 20s, were beginning to build their own lives. In 1905, when Lucas was 61 and Hannah was 58, they made the decision to gradually hand over the main operation of the ranch to David, who had always loved the land and the work. Lucas still rode out most days to check on things, unable to fully retire from the life he had built, but he appreciated having less responsibility and more time to spend with Hannah. They traveled a bit during these years, taking the train to San Francisco to see the ocean, visiting Grace in Phoenix, and spending a month with Samuel in Santa Fe. But they always returned to the ranch with relief, knowing that this was where they truly belonged. As they grew older together, their love only deepened. They knew each other's thoughts and moods so well that they could communicate with just a look. They held hands constantly, still kissed goodbye every morning when Lucas went out to work, and never went to sleep without telling each other they loved each other. Their physical passion mellowed into a tender intimacy that was just as satisfying in its own way. Hannah's hair turned silver, and Lucas would tell her she was more beautiful than ever. Lucas developed arthritis in his hands from years of hard work, and Hannah would massage them gently in the evenings, remembering how those hands had first offered her water and hope. They both moved more slowly than they once had, but they moved together, still partners in everything. In the spring of 1910, they celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them. All their children wanted to come and make a fuss, but Lucas and Hannah insisted on keeping it simple. They had supper together, just the two of them, reminiscing about all the years they had shared. "Sometimes I still cannot believe how it all happened," Hannah said, looking across the table at her husband. "That you found me, that you saved me, that you loved me." "I am the one who got lucky," Lucas countered, as he always did when they had this conversation. "You brought life to this place. You brought love and laughter and purpose. I was just surviving before you came. After, I started truly living." That night, they walked out onto the porch together, as they had done thousands of times before. The Arizona sky was brilliant with stars, the same stars that had looked down on Hannah when she thought she was dying under that oak tree 34 years ago. But everything had changed since then. She had built a life, raised children, loved and been loved, and found a home in every sense of the word. "You remember," Lucas said softly, "that first night when we talked about our feelings? When I asked you to marry me, of course," Hannah replied. "I remember everything about that night." "You said you were falling in love with me," Lucas continued. "Did you know then how deep that love would grow? Did you have any idea how much you would mean to me?" Hannah thought about this, leaning against the porch railing and looking out at the dark landscape of the ranch. "I knew I loved you," she said. "But no, I could not have imagined how much deeper that love would become with every passing year. I could not have imagined how many ways you would show me every single day that you treasure me. I could not have imagined feeling this safe, this cherished, this completely at home with another person." Lucas moved to stand beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "I built you a room and told you that you were home," he said. "But you built me a life, Hannah. You gave me everything that matters." They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. In the distance, they could hear cattle lowing, and closer by, the horses moving in their corrals. These were the sounds that had been the soundtrack of their entire life together. As the years continued to pass, Lucas and Hannah remained devoted to each other and to their family. They attended the weddings of their grandchildren, welcomed great-grandchildren into the world, and watched their legacy spread across Arizona and beyond. The Paxton name became synonymous with integrity, hard work, and strong family values. Thomas became a federal judge, appointed to the bench in 1912, and was known for his fairness and wisdom. Rose and Jack's ranch grew to rival the size of the original Paxton spread, and they raised 4 strong sons who all stayed in ranching. Samuel's paintings hung in museums, capturing the Wild West for future generations. Grace founded a music conservatory in Phoenix that still bears her name. David took the original ranch to new heights of success, implementing modern ranching techniques while respecting the traditions his father had established. Catherine married a doctor and moved to Tucson, where she raised 5 children and did extensive charity work. Lucas and Hannah took enormous pride in all their children had accomplished, but they were equally proud of the ordinary goodness they all displayed. Every one of their children was known for treating others with respect and kindness, for being honest in their dealings, and for valuing family above all else. These were the values Lucas and Hannah had modeled every day of their marriage, and seeing them continue into the next generations was deeply satisfying. In 1915, the Paxton family held a massive reunion at the ranch, with over 60 family members attending. There were tents set up all over the property, children running everywhere, and a feast that took days to prepare. Lucas and Hannah, now 71 and 68 respectively, sat in chairs of honor and watched the chaos with deep contentment. "We did all right, did we not?" Lucas said to Hannah, his hand clasped in hers. "We did better than all right," Hannah replied, squeezing his hand. "We did magnificently." That night, after all the family had settled down and the ranch was quiet again, Lucas and Hannah took one final walk to the oak tree. It was harder for them now, their movements slow and careful, but they still made the journey. They stood under the branches where their story had begun so many years ago, and Lucas held Hannah close. "If I could go back and change anything," Lucas said, "I would not. Not a single moment. Every hardship, every challenge, every fear and doubt, it was all worth it because it brought us here." "I feel the same," Hannah said, tears running down her weathered cheeks. "I thought my life was over when I lost Thomas. I thought that sleeping under these stars would be my last night on earth. But instead, it was the night before my real life began. The life I was always meant to have with you." They kissed then, a soft, gentle kiss that held 38 years of love and partnership and devotion. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling through their tears. Lucas looked at his wife, still beautiful to him even with her silver hair and lined face. "You are home, Hannah," he said, as he had said so many times before. "You are home, and you are loved, and you always will be." "I know," Hannah replied, touching his cheek tenderly. "I have always known, from that very first day when you found me and showed me such unexpected kindness. I was home from the moment you decided to save me. Everything else has just been the unfolding of that one perfect moment." They walked back to the house slowly, supporting each other, their steps matched after so many years of walking side by side. The ranch house glowed with warm light in the darkness, a beacon of home and safety and love. When they reached the porch, they paused and looked back at the land they had built their life on, the place that had given them everything. "Shall we go inside?" Lucas asked, and Hannah nodded. "Yes," she said. "Let us go home." And so they did, together as they had always been, as they would always be. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful and lasting from a single moment of compassion under the stars. Their love story had begun with a pregnant woman sleeping under the stars, with a rancher who had built her a room and told her she was home. And it had become a love story for the ages, proof that sometimes the most profound journeys begin with the simplest act of human kindness. And that home is not a place but a person, a feeling, a choice to love and be loved for all the days of your life. Lucas and Hannah Paxton lived out their remaining years in peace and happiness, surrounded by family and secure in the knowledge that they had lived well and loved deeply. When Lucas passed away in 1919 at the age of 75, Hannah held his hand and whispered that she would see him again soon. And when Hannah followed him just 18 months later at the age of 74, her last words were reported by the grandchildren at her bedside to be about the stars and about home, and about a man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the vast Arizona sky that had witnessed their entire love story. The oak tree where they met still stands on the property, protected and cherished by generations of Paxtons who know the story of how their family truly began. And if you visit that tree on a clear night, you can look up at the same stars that Hannah looked up at when she thought her life was ending, the same stars that witnessed Lucas's promise that she was home, the same stars that blessed one of the greatest love stories the Wild West ever knew. Their descendants still tell the story of how it all began, how a rancher found a pregnant woman sleeping under the stars, how he built her a room and told her she was home, and how from that moment of kindness came a love that lasted a lifetime and a legacy that continues to this day. It is a story about second chances and unexpected love, about building something lasting from the ruins of loss, and about the transformative power of choosing compassion when it would be easier to ride past. It is the story of Lucas and Hannah Paxton, and it is a story that will be told for generations to come, a testament to the enduring power of love.